If I may, I'd like to invite Dr. Helen Caldicott to take the rostrum, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Dr. Mahathir for setting up the Kale Declaration and the Foundation, and to say what a pleasure it is to work with a fellow physician, number one, and number two, to say that there are very few leaders in the world that I have met, and I've met many, including Ronald Reagan, who stand for such principled actions and who are true leaders in the world, true statespeople. There are very few. Some, I know, I met Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who worked for peace. Oscar Arias works for peace. Nelson Mandela works for peace. Mikhail Gorbachev helped to bring about the end of the Cold War, as did Reagan, actually. And Dr. Mahathir is one of these great people, and they're few and far between, and we need many more. And you should be very proud in Malaysia that you have Dr. Mahathir as a past leader. I want to also say that I honour you as NGOs, and in fact I've only ever worked in NGOs for the last 37 years. NGOs are working with me, produced the cessation of the French nuclear tests in the Pacific Ocean through actions in Australia and New Zealand, produced the cessation of uranium mining by working with unions in Australia for 5 years, working with the Physicians for Social Responsibility in the US. We educated the US people to be opposed to nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And I think through that organisation and Women's Action for Nuclear Disarmament, we helped to bring about the end of the Cold War. It's all gone backwards since then, but it was very powerful. And to my mind, NGOs can actually influence governments in major ways if you mobilise the people, if you educate the people and educate the media. And as President Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion, and I believe that's our role as NGOs, to educate and inform in credible ways. Now, as a physician, I'm deeply concerned and always have been about nuclear weapons. I want to bring you up to date. There are now 30,000 nuclear weapons in the world. 30,000. Of those 30,000, Russia and America own 97% of them. So the Cold War continues. World War III continues. And those weapons between Russia and America, many of them are on hair-trigger alert, on missiles ready to go at the press of a button by George Bush or Putin, Vladimir Putin, and each man, Putin and Bush, get 3 minutes to decide whether or not to blow up the world. There are enough weapons in the world today, nuclear weapons, to overkill every person 12 times. Now, that is not a medical term. You can only kill a person once, but it's a Pentagon term. You kill them, they stand up again, you kill them, and they stand up again. Overkill 12 times. That is quite obscene, and we are still very deeply in the nuclear age. I now want to talk about Iraq. The latest figures from a person who wrote an article in The Lancet, the British Medical Journal, last year, estimates that about 300,000 innocent civilians have been killed in Iraq thus far. 300,000 innocent civilians. Those figures do not come out in the media. And it's absolute mass slaughter. And for those of you who have ever worked in emergency rooms and hospitals and seen people come in from accidents, all torn up and dismembered and the like, and the smell, the stale, sickly smell of dried blood, trying to save people, will understand what I'm talking about. The mortuaries are full of bodies like butcher shops. The average mortuary in Baghdad receives 40 bodies on a quiet day. The bodies are stacked up vertically because there's not enough room for them. This is obscene. This is genocide. And it's orchestrated by the United States of America. who, because they have the most weapons in the world, is the world's bully. And because they're the world's bully, I don't see any nation standing up and disciplining the United States. And the way to stop a bully is to discipline them. And by not disciplining them, we're all enablers to America's nuclear addiction. And this has to stop. And I don't know why the leaders of the world lack courage to stand up to America. Now, what is happening in Iraq, apart from mass slaughter and the descent into civil war, instigated by the United States, is that the United States is actually conducting a nuclear war in Iraq. It is using what is called depleted uranium weapons. Depleted uranium is uranium-238. It's not going to do it, it can be used in a nuclear power plant. It is discarded after you enrich uranium. I'll walk you through this because you need to understand this in relationship to Iran. When you dig up uranium, and Australia has 40% of the world's uranium. I come from Australia. And we're about to dig it up because we've got a very bad Prime Minister at the moment, John Howard. When you dig up uranium, there are two isotopes, radioactive materials, uranium-235, and that's present in 0.7%. And that must be enriched to 3% to put in a nuclear power plant, and it fissions and breaks apart. If you enrich it to 50% or more, you can make nuclear weapons from it. And the Hiroshima bomb was a uranium bomb. Okay? The uranium that's discarded after the enrichment, 99.3% of the uranium is uranium-238, which cannot be fissioned. It's called depleted. It's not depleted of radiation, it's depleted of uranium-235. Okay? This is a chemistry lesson. So listen carefully. Now that uranium-238 is lying around in big piles, exuding radon gas. People who live near it, mostly the Navajo Indians, are dying of cancer in high rates because it's radioactive and it pollutes their water and their food. But it's 1.7 times more dense than lead, and it's free because it's waste. So the military in America discovered it and made solid anti-tank shells of 10 pounds each. Now, momentum equals mass by velocity. So if you have a really heavy shell and you shoot it off at high velocity, it'll penetrate the other fellow's tank and slice through the steel like a hot knife through butter. That it does. But it's also pyrophoric. So when it hits a tank, it bursts into flame, and up to 80% of that 10 pounds burns into tiny little aerosolized particles that can be inhaled into the lung, where they sit for years, irradiating cells, and the cells become cancers. Okay? America in the first Gulf War used 360 tons of this material near a town called Basra. My colleagues, paediatricians, noticed a few years later that the children started developing cancers in higher than normal incidences. Now, many years later, from 1991 to 2006, 15 years later, the incidence of childhood cancer has gone up 7 times, 700%. Why? Because the children play in the tanks that have been burnt by the depleted uranium. They're inhaling the little uranium particles. They play in the dirt. There are dust storms in the desert which blow this stuff up, and the material is concentrated in the milk and the food. Children are 10 to 20 times more sensitive to radiation than adults. They get cancer much more readily. And uranium is also excreted through the kidney and the semen. The semen, the most precious bodily fluid there is, because it contains the genes in the sperm for future generations. So the uranium irradiates the sperm and mutates the genes and damages the chromosomes. So the incidence of severe congenital deformities, babies being born with no skulls, or single eyes, or no arms, has gone up 700 times or 700% in Iraq. That is obscene. And the problem with uranium-238 is its half-life is 4.5 billion years. So what America is doing is contaminating the cradle of civilization forevermore, where writing began, law began, arithmetic began, and the like. And they've used at this time in this invasion, we don't know exactly how much because the Pentagon won't tell us, but over 2,000 tonnes, much of it in Baghdad, where half the population are children, and in Fallujah and elsewhere. This is a war crime beyond compare, and it is a nuclear war. Now let's get on to Iran. Iran, I've been to Iran, beautiful Iran, full of poets and history and absolutely magnificent mosques and Isfahan and Persepolis. So they're enriching uranium. Ooh, why are they enriching uranium? They might want to make bombs. They are allowed under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to enrich uranium to 3% for use in nuclear power plants. Why would they want nuclear power when they're bathed in oil? Because it's powerful to have a nuclear power plant. It's very masculine. The Department of Energy in America calls nuclear power hard energy, whereas solar power is soft energy, not to be considered. So there's a psychological element in this. It's powerful to have a nuclear power plant. And that's apparently what they want. Under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, they have not violated the law at all. And as my colleagues pointed out, that lies were talked about weapons of mass destruction so that America invaded Iraq illegally and has led to the slaughter of babies being cut in half by cluster bombs and missiles, and children being born deformed and developing cancer. Likewise, the lies are abounding now that Iran is going to build nuclear weapons. There's absolutely no evidence, according to El-Baradei, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, that Iran is intent on building nuclear weapons. And if America's got an arsenal of 10,000 nuclear weapons, why shouldn't Iran develop nuclear weapons? She's the model, and is Russia and China and France and England and Pakistan and Israel, which has the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and India. They're the models for the rest of the world, and if those countries don't start disarming rapidly soon, of course many other countries will develop nuclear weapons from their nuclear power plants. Once you've got a nuclear power plant, you make plutonium and you make nuclear weapons. Now, America's deciding that she's going to invade Iran and bomb the nuclear facilities. What are the facilities? They're enriching uranium. If they drop conventional weapons on the uranium facilities, we'll get the same situation as is occurring in Iraq. Uranium will be scattered to the four winds, children will inhale it, it will concentrate in the food chain, in the milk and the meat and the vegetables, and for the rest of time, because its half-life is 4.5 billion years, people will be developing cancer forevermore. That is a conventional attack on the nuclear facilities in Iran. That is wicked. But the neoconservatives in America are interested in using nuclear weapons on the nuclear facilities. So if you drop a nuclear weapon, a hydrogen bomb, onto a uranium enrichment facility, not only do you scatter huge amounts of uranium into the air, like in Iraq, but you also have a nuclear bomb exploding in the city, which can vaporize hundreds of thousands of people with the heat, which is many times the heat of that inside the center of the sun. In Hiroshima, a little boy was reaching up to catch a red dragonfly on the blue, against the blue of the sky in his hand, and there was a blinding flash, and he disappeared. And he left his shadow behind on the pavement. For at those temperatures, even the skeleton turns into gas. And I'm now going to read you what could happen if America or Israel uses nuclear weapons on the uranium facilities in Iran. There are two specific targets. One of them is at Natanz, and the other one is in Isfahan. If you've ever been to Isfahan, it's the most beautiful city, full of the smell of petunias at dusk and the mosques. And so this scenario targets 3 B-6111 earth-penetrating nuclear weapons, and they each explode with a yield of 340 kilotons. The Hiroshima bomb was 13,000 kilotons. This is 340 340,000 kilotons. No, it's not. It's 340 kilotons. The Hiroshima bomb was 13 kilotons, or equivalent to 13,000 tons of TNT. The Hiroshima bomb killed 120,000 people. 120 in a flash. This bomb is many times larger. Now I want you to listen to this carefully, and this is the end of my speech, but listen carefully and take it in, because we're on the brink of the precipice. Within 48 hours of those 6 bombs being used, 3 on Natanz and 3 on Isfahan, within 48 hours, radioactive fallout would cover much of Iran, most of Afghanistan, and spread into Pakistan and India. Fallout from the use of a barring weapon such as one of these would be worse radioactive fallout than that from a surface or airburst weapon due to the extra radioactive dust and debris ejected from the blast site. Millions of tons of radioactive rock pulverized into fallout. In the immediate area of the 2 attacks, within 48 hours, 2 days, an estimated 2.6 million people would die. 2.6 million people. About 2/3 of these would die from radiation-related causes, either prompt casualties from the immediate radiation effects or from localized fallout. Over 1 million people would suffer immediate injuries because winds of 500 miles an hour literally suck people out of buildings, turning them into missiles travelling at 100 miles an hour. Bits of glass flying through the air at 100 miles an hour decapitate people and penetrate human bodies. There'll be thermal and flash burns, radiation sickness, broken limbs, lacerations, blindness. If you look at the flash, you're instantly blinded forever. Crush injuries, burst eardrums. Over a wider region, over 10.5 million people would be exposed to significant radiation from fallout, leading to radiation sickness, where you start vomiting, your hair falls out, you brush your hair and it comes out in a brush, you clean your teeth and you're bleeding around your teeth, you bleed from your rectum, from your vagina, from your nose and die. Future many cancer deaths because radiation causes cancer years later, genetic abnormalities in future generations down the time track because of the abnormalities in the sperms and eggs, as well as high rates of stillbirths, many thousands of abortions, spontaneous abortions, malignancies and hypothyroidism. Most, if not medical facilities near the 2 attack sites would be destroyed or unusable because they're so radioactive. And see if you can address them. I don't see any leaders in the world with the psychological courage to speak out against this incredible international crime. And once America or Israel uses nuclear weapons there, India might say, oh, well, we'll use them against Pakistan, or vice versa. And the lid is taken off Pandora's box, the nuclear box. And what will happen? We're in the height of anxiety when a nuclear war happens for the first time since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Russia get all nervous, and the people controlling the Russian nuclear weapons or Chechen terrorists invade the command centers in Russia at the height of anxiety, launch the Russian nuclear attack. The Americans pick up the attack on their satellites, and within half an hour they've launched their attack. 1,000 nuclear weapons on 100 cities could create such a pall of black radioactive smoke which will cover the earth with a cloud so thick it blocks out the sun for a year, and there's a short ice age, and everything and everyone freezes to death in a dark nuclear winter, and the end of most life on earth. This is what America is planning. This is what it could lead to. The end of the creation. I'm not exaggerating. I'm speaking to you as a scientist and a physician. We face the most serious crisis the earth has ever faced right now. Thank you.
Can I now open the floor to questions, please? Yes, Cik Roslan. And after that, the lady over there.
Thank you, Dr. Mukris. I'm Roslan, representing the Ansara, the Association, World Peace Association of ex-Mara Junior Science College. Thank you for the interesting chemistry lesson. I grew up rather during the age of the CND, campaign of nuclear disarmament. Very active in UK, Europe especially. I wonder what happened to that now, Dr. Helen. Where are the campaigners? Have they grown old and forgot about, or thinking that the Cold War is over, there's no more the need for the campaign against nuclear disarmament? Secondly is this, the action of America, especially in the Middle East, to me, it seems like leading to ethnic cleansing. What is your opinion on this? Thank you.
Okay, C and D, and I was part of that anti-nuclear movement. We all thought that when the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall came down, that the weapons would miraculously disappear. And George I actually removed a lot of tactical nuclear weapons from Europe to help Gorbachev get the nuclear weapons back from the Ukraine and the like back to Russia and deal with his difficult military. Militaries can be very difficult for heads of state. But then Clinton came in, and Clinton, although a nice, charming man, has no courage. And he didn't take on the Pentagon to say, okay, now I'm going to get an Air Force One and I'm going to fly over and see Boris Yeltsin, who was an alcoholic, very severe alcoholic actually, and who was totally compliant, and say, here Boris, sign this document, we're going to eradicate our nuclear weapons bilaterally in 5 years. So the legacy that Clinton has left is that America still has over 10,000 hydrogen bombs and Russia about the same or more. That's the legacy of Clinton. So nothing happened. America's still got a policy to fight and win a nuclear war, which means, against Russia, to go first, destroy all the Russian people and their missiles, and win the war. The Russians are so scared that that will happen. They've got a centre in the Urals where they're going to say if Moscow's destroyed and Putin's dead in the first strike, they send up a rocket called the Dead Hand that can send a signal to all the missiles in Russia to launch without any human input, so they don't all die before they have an opportunity to kill all the Americans. Is it ethnic cleansing? Look, that's a little bit beyond me as a physician. America wants to get its hands on all the oil in the world, and most of the oil, as was mentioned today, is controlled by Islamic people. And we've got to stop burning oil because oil is creating global warming. And when you see the film made by Al Gore, you will know that we are in a severe acute clinical crisis, and the Earth is in the emergency, in the intensive care unit from global warming, and we've got to stop burning oil. And I think that most of your electricity comes from burning oil, does it, or is it hydro? Is it oil? Yeah. Well, you've got to stop burning oil and turn all your lights off in Kuala Lumpur at night. It looks very pretty, but you've got to start conserving and saving, because burning oil creates carbon dioxide, which creates global warming. So America's going to destroy all these countries to get the oil, to keep burning the oil to create global warming. So you see, it's a vicious circle. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Zahara Alatas from the National Council of Women's Organization, and I'm proud to say that I'm the chairperson of the Environment Commission. I like to spread the word that I'm very keen on preserving our environment. I totally agree with the speaker so far that there is a desperate need for an active civil society, and that civil society should be a civilized one. This is the first time I've heard in forums that you call the civil society a civilized one. You just don't want a civil society, but you want a civilized one, yeah. Dr. van Spoornek said that in Germany you hope for peace for a long time there. I need some clarification here. Is this peace due to the active participation of the Greenpeace movement that the EU takes very seriously? Is this kind of mentality of the Greenpeace members due to an historical background, a strong social foundation which has to be created in the schools, the family, and the religious institutions? We can say we need a good civil society, but again, we have the same people in our NGOs with a kind of mentality that does not really push for change. Or is this change not coming because we are not united? Thank you.
Me?
Yes, if you like.
Yes, NGOs need to unite, and I think as a doctor, and Dr. Mahathir talked about this yesterday, we're very strategic and systematic thinkers. So when a patient comes into our surgery, you have to first make the diagnosis of the most important and acute situation facing the patient to cure that before you can get on to the chronic symptoms. And I think that the NGOs today need to unite and recognise what the most dangerous threat to the human race or life on Earth actually is, and unite to combat or to fix that. And I think in Malaysia it's a perfect place for that to happen. But as a strategic thinker and as a physician, I see, and I'm sorry if I was a little rough with you today, that I may have been a little too strong for you, because you're a very polite society and very kind, and I may have come on a little too strong. I guess I came on strongly because, or my speech was strong, because I'm so deeply concerned, and when you get to know so much, there's a need to impart that information to others. So I apologise if I was a little rough with you. On the other hand, I did it because I very much love you all as potential patients, and because I love life on this precious planet of ours. And I guess I'm frightened. So if you heard anxiety in my voice, it's because I am frightened and worried about what is happening today. And I think fear is appropriate for our survival, and fear can be translated into action. And I think we must allow these awful facts to penetrate our souls so that we can feel the feelings of despair and depression and grief, and go through those feelings so that as you proceed through them, you work out what you're going to do. And I think the natural inclination is to cover up and say, I didn't hear what she said. I don't want to look at it. It's too scary. I'm comfortable. And I understand that. That's called psychic numbing. But it's terribly important, as in Germany and elsewhere, that people had to face what was happening in order to save their lives. It's the fight and flight mechanism. If you're chased by a bull, your blood pressure goes up, your blood sugar goes up, and you can jump a fence 6 feet high. But that's an immediate situation. There's the bull, and you're wearing red. But we have a bull in the paddock, and we know who the bull is, and we have to extrapolate in our imaginations to know what the threat is so that we can actually fix it, not just for ourselves, but our children. Greenpeace, yes, is very good. I mean, I think that they caused the vote at the International Whaling Commission to go against Japan. by demonstrating against killing of the whales in the Southern Ocean. Greenpeace works more on environmental issues than on peace per se, although it is called Greenpeace, and they set off demonstrating against French nuclear testing in the Pacific. But there are a lot of good peace groups in the United States that I'm familiar with, not so many in Australia at the moment. And I think we've got to get back into the notion that we are under a very acute threat, as we were during the height of the Cold War, and I think it's more serious now than it was during the Cold War because people are less aware. And we must become more aware. And I think my book, The New Nuclear Danger, which outlines all the things I just talked about, including Iraq but not Iran, will be on sale somewhere outside at the moment. I think that's true. So if you want to get more information, more in-depth information, so you have the ammunition to take on the media and teach them and yourself, you could certainly find that book outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, lady, please.
She's
A very good morning, all the panelists, and to Dr. Marty. My name is Bridget Menetis. I'm from the Brahma Kumari's World Spiritual University. Now, I'm not having a question, but I'd just like to make a comment to Dr. Helen. Your speech was strong, but there's a lot of truth in it. And 17 years ago, whatever you said, I felt that. And so I've changed my whole lifestyle. And so there are about 6,000 centers in the world that are doing what I'm doing. So much so that a newspaper, local newspaper here, have given me a column on peace, which is very unusual. And I'm having it for the last 7 years. It used to be called serendipity for 6 years. Now they've changed it to inner growth. And our way of peace is we do a lot of reflection. I get up at 3 in the morning and I reflect up to 7. Because all human beings have intrinsic goodness in us, and we try to emerge this through silence. And our lifestyle is simple. All we want is to give peace, love, and happiness to everyone. Thank you.
I think that I'm obviously motivated by love as a physician, having taken the Hippocratic Oath that to save lives is my vocation. And I think we express our love in various ways, and I think that your spiritual path is very important. And indeed, if George Bush could get up at 3 in the morning and contemplate till 7 a.m., we may be on a different track. Maybe you could go and see him and convince him and pray about it. So I think it takes all levels. It's heterogeneous, multifactorial, the way we approach this. But certainly I believe we must devote our lives and the rest of our lives to making sure that this extraordinary creation on this planet, we may be the only life in the universe, continues. And I suppose I would just like to end by saying, quoting Albert Einstein, who said the splitting of the atom, i.e. nuclear weapons, changed everything save man's mode of thinking, the way men think about war. Thus we drift towards unparalleled catastrophe, and that's what I was outlining today. So we need your strength and spirituality to support us in what we're doing, and we thank you for doing that. And for the others, I think we need to apply our love in various ways, and I think the ways are quite obvious that we have to approach what we're doing. And I think Dr. Mahathir exemplifies that love towards humanity. Thank you.
And we have just one last question. The gentleman with the jacket, sorry, yes, please. Yes. I apologize to the gentleman in blue. Perhaps we can take your questions later.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Said Barkat. I'm from the Research Information Center on Islam. Islam stands for peace, therefore it is very relevant. Now, I'm a bit confused. We have the United Nations with all its charter, and it doesn't seem to be able to hold back Bush. Now we are appealing to civil society. During the beginnings of Iraq war, millions of people went out and demonstrated in London, in fact in so many countries. And President Bush got re-elected, so did Blair. I cannot understand this. My only conclusion is this, that the whole issue of war is being motivated by greed.
Like what?
Greed, G-R-E-E-D, greed. Now, we know about the evils of war, the evils of what Helen has said about nuclear war. We can see it on TV, the effects of war, or nuclear war, in the film The Day After. We've seen that. And we know about it. Everyone knows about it. The funny part is that everybody still supports Bush and Blair. Now, the United Nations says, no, we cannot do anything. Is it because we want a share of the spoils? So we support the powers that be. As Shakespeare says, for mine own good, all causes shall give way. So can you explain this? Thank you.
Well, I spend a lot of time in the United States, and so I can speak from that perspective. I won't mention Australia because they're pretty out of it as well. But we just follow the United States at the moment. Although we get better media in Australia, we see the pictures of the bodies. We read the articles by Paul McGowan and others who are doing wonderful journalism in Iraq. The American people on the whole are not exposed to any of that. Very, very little do they see. They sip their lattes in Starbucks coffee houses. Sorry, Hans, but they remind me of the Germans during the Second World War, who lived very well in Europe as they plundered Europe, and were obviously, many of them, not aware of the cattle trucks with the Jews going off to concentration camps and the like. And someone said, Edmund Burke said, the only way evil flourishes is for good people to do nothing. And I think you could come back again to the psychic numbing that I referred to, and that people want to stay in their comfort zones and they don't really give a damn. As long as they can drive their four-wheel cars doing 10 miles to the gallon, and they don't really care if global warming is occurring, even if their children have no future. So the way I found as a physician to crack open a psychic numbing, and I didn't give a very good speech today in that way, is to get into their souls. And if I can get them to cry because they love their children so much and their children do not have a future, then you know you've changed their lives forever that night. And you can give a lot of information and data and stuff, that won't change them. You have to be able to appeal to their humanity. And it's very hard to do that in the United States with 300 million people now without the cooperation of the media to get on Oprah or the Good Morning America show or one of the others. It's very hard to educate without the cooperation of the media. I don't have all the answers, but I do know that as a medical profession we were able in the 1980s to talk to the American people about these issues from a medical perspective, because they used to say to me, well, it's better to be dead than red. And we'd say, well, do you know what happens if a nuclear bomb drops on Boston? And they said, no, you tell us. And we'd describe the concentric circles of destruction and bodies flying through the air and vaporization, and then they'd say, oh my God, nuclear war's bad for our health. And that's what turned America around, basically that message during the 80s. And we have to re-educate them again. And I do certainly believe at the moment that the American people are determining the fate of the earth. The rest of the world, though, needs to stand up and be counted. And I think tough love is appropriate. If your father is an alcoholic, you say in the end, I'm not going to put up with this anymore, I'm taking you to a drying out centre. And that's tough love. And America as a nation needs, or its leaders need to be taken to a drying out centre. So they dry out from their addiction to power and greed and force and brutality and nuclear weapons. And they're not the only nation, of course, at stake or at risk, but I think at the moment it's very obvious that they're the main one. And we have to be brave and courageous and speak the truth. It's not a very good answer, but it's the best I can do.